Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions, 4 p.m. BST on a Wednesday afternoon. I have Fee with me today. Hello, Fee. How you doing?
Hi, Danny. I'm great. Trying to wake up a little bit, but I'm good.
So I don't butcher your name. Do you want to do the full pronunciation of your surname, please?
Soutter.
It's Soutter. I thought it was.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to share to the groups. Can you let the guys know what you've been up to this week? And then what we'll do is we'll get into your story going all the way back to your childhood.
Okay. So this week's been like the final sprint, I guess, for me, being very late to the game for getting ready for Q4. So I've had 4 products that were meant to be live about 6 weeks ago, and got the last 2 live this week. So did a bit of a happy dance, to be honest, Danny, to get those final 2 products live. A bit late to the game, but at least better than never.
So you basically, it took 10 weeks and it's just docked today, one of them, isn't it? The containers. You were saying to me earlier on, it was floating around Europe.
Yeah, so 2.5 months on the water. It was meant to be a 4-week trip, but due to congestion at the UK ports, wasn't able to get in.
Cool. Right. Let's get into your in-depth. Let's take it back to your childhood. Earliest memory of realizing you want to own a business, be an entrepreneur, etc.
Well, I grew up in an era and an environment where I was encouraged to be a good girl and get a safe job and to, be a good wife, I suppose. So being an entrepreneur really didn't start to burn in my belly till my mid-30s.
Really?
To be honest. And that's when I guess, I started to realize that I was a teacher prior to this career. And I had reached the pinnacle of where you could go in teaching. I'd done my master's. I'd reached, the top of the pay scale, and I was only 35. And also I had children at that point, and I was finding that working for somebody else was preventing me from being able to mother in the way I wanted to mother. And that's when I started to wake up out of this little box that I had grown up in.
Cool. Before we dial into that, I'd like to go back and then we'll chart that as your history. So going back to, you said about in school going get a good job, etc. If we start at junior school level, what was school like for you? Were you into it? Were you academic, etc.?
Yeah, look, I am a natural academic, and I'm one of those people that fortunately does fit into that mold of learning in that way. And I had a pretty happy schooling. I was at a lovely school on the beach here in Sydney, so I don't have any complaints about school. Look, I didn't excel, but I was happy.
Yeah. And who were your inspirations as a kid?
Snoopy.
We haven't had Snoopy. That's a good one. Is there any more than Snoopy or?
Look, like many girls of the 70s, I wanted to grow up and be a princess, and that's what I was saying before, like women little girls in those days, we really were sort of, we had this whole idea that, being a princess and being rescued by a guy was what was most important in life.
Wow.
And, things are changing quite rapidly, of course, now. But, so to me, it was all Disney, wanting to be a princess. I didn't really look further afield in terms of actual real people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we've gone through, what was the stuff that interested you most when you was at school? I know you said you was academic, but what did you lean towards?
The arts, craft, anything creative. So I was into musical theatre, dance, the visual arts. That was when I was in my happy place. And so it's not surprising that what I'm doing now is very creative, because that's where my strength lies. At school, I just really struggled with maths and still do to this day. Like, it's not my forte whatsoever.
Well, it's a left brain, right brain thing. And like you said, you're very creative, So moving into senior school, how was that? Was the adjustment there? Because it's quite often a lot different for people, isn't it? So you enjoyed school on the beach and stuff. What happened when you went to high school or senior school?
Well, luckily the school I was at was K to 12. So it was a girls' school. So there wasn't really any adjustment for me. It was the same campus, the same kids. And although there was new senior school teachers, I literally on the other side of the corridors saw all my classrooms that I was in for my whole junior school life. So Yeah, I was in a beautiful environment in terms of it being very nurturing, I think that's why it was many happy years for me there.
Yeah. So you left school. Where did you go next?
I went to university in Sydney, I went to Sydney University, one of the more traditional looking, more like the old school English types of universities. So it's very pretty, and that's where I studied teaching.
Okay, and how was that for you?
That was good. I mean, at that point, I'd moved out of home, and I think I was more interested in socialising, like most university students. But somehow I managed to get through. I did very well at university. I look back now, I think, God, I don't know how, because I was out pretty much.
You was out partying and stuff. So what were the kind of things, if you don't mind? I mean, this is in depth, so it's open. I know maybe parents would end up listening, but let's talk about some of the stuff you got up to. You had a bit of a wily smile on your face. How you got through it? Were you out to the clubs and stuff?
Yeah, well, in the 90s, the gay scene in Sydney was really, really good. So Oxford Street in Sydney, and so the gay clubs were just spectacular. So I discovered that environment and had an absolute ball partying with my gay friends. And then that was also the era of the rave scene, sort of in the UK and in Australia. So out at all the sort of the big festivals and warehouse parties at that point. Lots of fun. But as I say, I look back now and I just am in awe that I actually managed to finish university.
Yeah, no, when you go for the rave scene, it's quite tough to hold anything down, isn't it? So do you ever do the big day out or anything like that?
No. I really preferred the more underground type of scenes. So, that was back in the old days when you had to ring the 0055 number here and then to find out where the party was, and then you get in the car and you drive and you find somebody on a street corner.
So fully legal then, yeah?
Oh, completely.
Cool. You left uni. What was your first job? What did you do there?
Well, I couldn't get a job as a teacher because at the time there was an oversupply of primary school teachers in New South Wales. And so I got a job with a company selling mobile phones over the phone, and did really well at that, strangely enough, considering I'd never really worked for business before. But that was back in the early days when you had the huge big phones, and I used to have to do the upsell people to get the car kits and whatnot. So I did that for a couple of years, and then still couldn't get a job, and then found out that the UK was screaming for teachers and that Australian teachers were considered a good find. So I put myself on a plane at 25 and jumbled over to London, and that's where I lived for a couple of years.
So, tell me about that experience, because it's a long old way, isn't it? When you take 2 flights from Australia, it's 24 hours each way. I've done it twice. The jet lag just killed me. I don't think I could. I love Australia. I love Sydney. I love Noosa. I've DJ'd in Perth, Melbourne, Adelaide, Newcastle, all over. It's beautiful. It's just the flights absolutely killed me. UK wise, how much different? Being from Sydney, right? Sunshine quite a lot a year round. I mean, if you look at Melbourne's closer to London weather-wise in terms of the seasonal aspect. What kind of shock to the system was it like to come to rainy old Britain?
Look, it was my first time overseas. It was my first time on a plane. So I was this wide-eyed, sort of pretty naive Sydney girl. And I don't think I understood what cold meant until I got to London.
Yeah.
I really didn't. I had no idea what zero even meant, let alone -0 in temperature. I will admit there were some moments coming out of places in the middle of the night trying to get a taxi home, and I just remember shivering so much that I almost wanted to cry because I was just beyond cold. I just didn't know how to deal with it. So that was a bit of a shock. So
that was your first teaching gig in London. You spent in London for a couple of years. What was your next move from there?
Back to Sydney. So that was around 98. Came back to Sydney, and after teaching in London, I found that schools here were much more willing to give me an interview. And I ended up teaching back at the school where I grew up in. And I remember in the interview, they were saying, if you can I remember them saying about classroom management. They said, "Oh, well, I guess we figured that if you can handle the kids in Southeast London, you can handle kids anyway." So, got the job there, and that was pretty much really that time in London kickstarted my career in teaching.
Yeah. Do you think you landed that because you had London on your resume? It's not prestigious, but it's the fact that you've taught internationally and you've come back home.
Yeah.
People more chance to give you a chance, if you like. Yeah,
exactly. And, you know, where I was teaching in Southeast London, it was a pretty tough gig. And so
where were you? Eltham, around that way?
Yeah, well, I did a lot of casual teaching to start with, but then I ended up in Woolwich.
Yeah, it's pretty rough around there. My cousin's from there. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a tell you what, it was the area I grew up in. Sydney was, you know, very nice area, private girls' school. So you can imagine for me, it was very quick learning to cope in that environment. I really had no idea and had no exposure to how tough it can be for some people and the type of upbringings they have. So it was humbling for me, and you know, I really valued that time of my life.
Yeah. So you're back in Sydney, you're back in your old school. I mean, you've done a bit of an extreme, right? So you go to UK, the other side of the world, you come back again after 2 years, you land a job back in your old school. So what else was going on around that time? Because you taught for a long time, right? So
yeah. So basically I came back and one of my best friends introduced me to the guy who I ended up marrying. So we met about a month after I came back, and it was just one of those love stories.
So you got to be the princess.
Yeah, pretty much. But he's the father of my three boys, and we spent, you know, many happy years together. We're not together now, but very good friends. Like, he's still my best friend, and we're very supportive of one another and co-parent our boys together. And, you know, on Monday, my middle boy has his 17th birthday, and we're going to be together celebrating as a family.
That's excellent. So how long was you back in Sydney at the school teaching?
Look, that was another huge growth period for me for teaching in a different way, because all of a sudden I was teaching in an environment where I had every resource under the sun that I wanted. And it was, you know, that was at that point I was able to really sort of push myself in terms of what do I want to do as a teacher and how do I want to excel with these kids. And in 1998, I had a kindergarten class, and, you know, that's when, you know, the internet was just starting to burgeon, and technology was really becoming a big part of teaching. And I decided that I was going to create an electronic book with the kids in the class, and there was no fancy programs back then, so I had to learn JavaScript to hand code this book. So we wrote the book, the kids illustrated, I scanned it all in, we did the audio recording in the classroom, and then I created this digitized book where you could turn the pages and press the sound. And so that's kind of when my mind really started to expand, and I did start to think outside the square in terms of possibilities and you know, how I wanted to grow as a professional. Yeah.
And so how long were you there for before your next gig?
So I was there until I fell pregnant with my firstborn, Josh, and that was in 2002 he was born. I came back briefly for a little while and then had my secondborn, who was 18 months apart. And it was at that point that I did resign, because as the mother of two under two.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work. So we moved to Queensland at that point with the two little ones. And that's, I guess, where I started to work out how I could make money from home. And I did all the traditional things like selling Tupperware and a little bit of MLM and all those types of things that, you know, a person does when they're stuck at home trying to work out how they can bring income in whilst raising children. So I guess that really was the first signs of me realizing that I could actually make money off my own back and not under an employer.
Yeah. And so what was, once you've got through, you know, multi-level marketing and all that kind of stuff, what did you land on? What was the one that stood out? Because you try loads of things, copywriting, you know, affiliate marketing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I went to one of those seminars with, you know, with all the platform speakers, and then we're all spruiking their different programs. And I did that for a couple of years, sort of around 2006, 2007. 2008, I started to lean towards the world of what was then called internet marketing. Of course, we use the word digital now. And so I learnt initially about affiliate marketing and started to play around with affiliate marketing, setting up landing pages, the one-page landing pages, which you literally back then could get ranking on Google within 24 hours. Front page, like for your main keywords, back in the day when we could game the system. So I was making money from that and really not knowing what I was doing. And then I was at a barbecue and I overheard a group of people speaking, and the reticular activating system, when you've got your mind on something and then all of a sudden you start to notice it everywhere. And I heard this group of people at the barbecue who I didn't know talking about the World Internet Summit that had just been held last weekend in the Gold Coast. And so I started to hone in, and then they were talking about all the different speakers, and then they mentioned someone by the name of James Schramko and how he was this Aussie guy who was an underground digital marketer and it was really, really successful. And I sat there shaking my head thinking, I grew up with someone called James Schramko. I wonder if that's my friend. And so I went over and introduced myself, butted in, apologising for eavesdropping, and very quickly realised that they were talking about my friend. And I hadn't spoken to him probably since my early 20s. And I came home, I thought, that's a sign, like I've got to contact James. Like, what's the chances of me wanting to do this and really not knowing what I was doing, and then finding out one of my very good friends was successful at it. So we reconnected, and he became my mentor.
Wow. And then where'd you go from there?
Well, through James, I learned everything over the years, I learned everything I needed to know to establish a consultancy business. So I initially started doing websites and SEO for small businesses in the local area and for friends or family and all that kind of stuff. And did that pretty much until 2018. But in that time, I had the digital business, but then also started speaking at gigs and running my own seminars, had my own coaching program for a while, wrote a book, authored in a couple of other books. So everything was sort of really growing rapidly for me. And then in 2014, I was in a car accident and had a neck injury.
Right.
And everything just pretty much crashed at that point for me.
Are you okay to walk us through it? I mean, it sounds kind of serious.
Yeah, I am. Look, it wasn't anything severe in terms of broken bones or backs or anything, but I got a whiplash injury, which soft tissue, which unlike a broken bone, which eventually will heal,
and repair,
soft tissue can hang around, and I'm just one of those very unlucky people that still to this day I get quite severe symptoms from it and have to manage that. But for the first 6 months after that accident, I was in bed, blinds closed, painkillers that made me feel sick. I didn't want to talk on the phone, didn't want to see anyone, and I slipped into a situational depression at that point. Mainly because of the situation that I was in, because when you're dealing with chronic pain and being a single parent and trying to keep a business running, the pressure was just immense, and I just felt horrible.
So what was your darkest hour just before dawn?
I remember saying to a therapist at the time that I had forgotten what it is to be fee. Like I said, I don't think I'll ever be that person again. And I feel so far down that hole that when I look up, I can't even see the light. Like I can't even see where the opening is to get out of here. And I just felt so trapped. And I remember that feeling, and I'll never forget it, because, it's just to know that you can be in such a deep, deep hole. And I look at where I am now, and to think that I've come out of that, and not only just come out of that, but I've managed to rebuild my life. It just astounds me, because I remember how helpless and hopeless I felt.
So what were your building blocks? Obviously you're on your knees, and but the only way is up, isn't it? If you've hit rock bottom, you can only go upwards. what did you do getting through that period? What are some of the baby steps you took to get back on your feet?
Yeah, look, it's all those little things that at the time don't seem like they're making any difference. So whether it means I literally just opened my blinds that day, if it means that, yeah, it might have meant that perhaps I actually ate something that was healthy for me, or maybe I spoke to someone on the phone, because I went through a long period of time where someone would call and I'd seen one of my best friends, but I still wouldn't pick it up because I just didn't even know what to say to them, or even I didn't have the energy to pretend to be happy because the only energy I did have to pretend that everything was okay was with my kids. So, yeah, I just, whether it be going for a walk or just those little self-care things that make a difference. And at the time, I didn't think they were making a difference, but gradually you build up from there, I guess. And if you're having your blinds open 3 days out of 7, at least that was better than last week when you only had them open 2 days out of 7.
Yeah.
The little things that do make a difference. And I remember the therapist that I was seeing, she's saying that recovery is not like this, like it's not a straight line. It's going to be up and down and up and down. Sometimes you literally go backwards, and to not punish yourself and not feel too bad when that happens, because that's part of the process when you're healing.
Yeah. So do you had is this post or pre, like you had the therapist? Was it around that time that you had someone to speak to get through it?
Yeah.
And that she gave you, or he or she gave you a framework to work from?
Yeah, and because I'm being a creative person, she did a lot of drawings on paper for me and drew a lot of things, and that's kind of what connected with me and helped me to grab onto something.
Yeah. So how long did it take for us to get feedback then?
Years. Like I'll be honest. So that was 2014, 15, 16, 17, I think, was when a little bit of normality started to appear. But it was at that point I realised, because still having bouts of migraine and pain, and even today, like I've had to take anti-inflammatories because everything on here is all seized up. And that was just from doing a very small thing, and it aggravates the neck. So 2017 was when I started realising that having to deal with clients and go to meetings on days when I'm not good was no longer going to serve me. I needed something that was going to have to be a lot more flexible. So if I did find myself in a couple of days of needing to be in bed, that my business would run no matter what. And so I was on the lookout for something, and I wanted to use my skills that I built over the previous decade in the digital world. And that's when I came across Amazon, and the lights in my eyes. Like,
I was going to say, everyone gets the spark, don't they? They see the Amazon thing. I done the same. I remember the date. It was the 31st of March, 2015. I know exactly the date when it happened. So talk me through the moment that happened for you when you found that discovery, and how did you land upon it?
Well, I went to a seminar to hear Gary Vee talk. I'm a huge fan of Gary's, and I literally only went to hear Gary. I wasn't really concerned or interested in any of the other speakers that day. And in fact, I had my laptop and was working with the consultancy biz whilst most of them spoke. And then Adam Hudson got on stage and had a whole pile of his students in the crowd, and he captured my attention. And so I stopped working and I started listening. And the more he spoke, the more I realised that this was the business model. This was the train that was going to help propel me back to the level of success that I knew I deserved and wanted.
Okay, and so how did that all start then? Can you share any of the early products that you launched that maybe not around now?
Well, just to learn the actual process, I just went down to a discount store here in Sydney and bought 100 boxes of a teacup set.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to learn the process of shipping in, setting up the listings, doing PPC. And so I bought 100 of these things, shipped them over to the States. It cost me $1,000 to ship them over. But at that point, I didn't really care. I just wanted to learn the process. And you know what? I sold out of those 100 boxes over the space of 8 months with basically no promotion. And that was, to me, I thought, wow, this ugly teacup set that I bought And, I had no idea what I was doing still learning the ropes, and pretty much no PPC, and it still sold.
And so you started on .com. Sorry, just to correct me, what year was this? 2017, was it?
No, this was 2018. Yeah.
Okay, so it's only 2 years and a bit that you've been on Amazon, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, last year, that was 2019. So 2018, late 2018 was when I came across Amazon. And then 2019 was when I was in that learning phase and tested that one product. And then 2020, this year, January, was when I launched.
Wow. Okay. Let's walk through that then. Let's go back to that first product. Beyond there, to give me a timeline. Walk me through what happened throughout that year, the Q4, etc.
Well, I'd run out of stock with that first product because I only had 100. I sent it over in, I think, February or March and had sold out. I went to Canton Fair of that year on my own. And at that point, I had an idea of what turned out to be my first product. It was on my list of quite a few things, but I had everything from kitchen knives to, fake plants to everything on my list at that point. Had no idea about what my brand was going to be. I was just focused on the product. I just wanted to find my first product. And so I spent 5 days wandering around Canton Fair like, a little lost chicken knowing.
I mean, Canton's great. And normally it's like you got the WeChat groups and you have meals and did you go on your own or did you meet people? Because it's quite lonely if you're just on your own.
Yeah, no, I did go on my own. There were some other people from an Amazon group here in Australia over there. And so in the evenings I think 2 of the evenings I met up with them for dinner. But during the day I was on my own. I did hire a Chinese guide for the first 2 days. I went on to Upwork and found somebody who could help me go through the fair and translate for me because I had no idea what I was going to be up for and whether I was going to be able to communicate properly with them. And I'm glad that I did have him because some of the suppliers' English wasn't great, especially when you start getting into the nitty-gritty and asking the more detailed questions. But I think most importantly, having that guide, seeing as it was my first time in China and I was traveling alone, it just gave me confidence about getting around and knowing, what was left, right, up and down.
Yeah. So let's walk through up to now because you're a 7-figure business now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you've done that since January.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's go to January now. So how comes someone who's just done a tea set? Where did you switch gears to go? Okay, we're going to put it to the floor now.
So April was when I met the manufacturer of that first product. And then during May and June, we worked on design samples. During that time, I also developed my brand in terms of what was the brand going to be called, what was the brand identity, doing the logo design through 99 Designs. And so by the time I got so it was May, June, July, around July, I then had a brand to go with this one product. But still, it was just this kind of shop front that I had created. I hadn't really thought any further than that. Yeah. And then because of the category that I was in, the product had to go through tests for me to be able to sell in the US in that category. And then one of the components failed the testing. So I then got delayed and ended up missing Q4 because of the fail on the test, which was a shame. And at the time, I remember thinking that was massive. Oh my God, I've missed Q4 because I think a lot of Amazon sellers, it's so built up that
is everyone's gearing to Q4.
Yes,
that's what where the wins and the losses come from for most people. I know people sell year round, but if you sell something that goes 4 to 10x, it's like people build their year because you think within that 3-month window, which is really 6 weeks, if you break it down in terms of when it really peaks, that's where you make your money versus the other 9 months of the year. Generally, like if you averaged it out, so you missed your Q4. How did you pick yourself up from that?
The stock arrived just after New Year in the US. And so by the time it got into Amazon, I think it was towards the end of the second week of January. So around the 14th, 15th of Jan when I went live. And in the first week, I probably made, a dozen sales. Second week, I doubled that. Third week, doubled that, and it just went like this. And I just remember watching it going, oh my God, this works. Like, this really works. And it was so exciting to see all that sort of year, I guess it was, of doing all my product research, validation, going to China, development, all that whole process took me a year. So even though I've been live since January, there was a year of learning, development and everything before that.
Yeah.
And I think because I spent all that time really working on all that prior to launch, when I did launch, and then it just took off. And I think it was because there was a lot of background work that had happened beforehand. So
what do you think made it a difference? Because basically you've come out the tracks, you've had a bit of a hit, haven't you? It's a hero product. What do you think? What do you put to it other than the technical elements of it? What do you think was what made it take off and it was separated from the others?
Look, I'll be honest. There were some parts of the product validation process that I did ignore, like using some of the tools. They say, okay, make sure that it's under 500 reviews. Well, the top sellers had thousands of reviews, and is it a saturated market? Well, yeah, there's a lot of sellers and there's a lot of my product. But when I looked at them, they were all horrible. They were cheaply made. The design was, looks like it had come out of last century. Like it's a retro style product, I guess. But it looks like no one's really thought about how you can design that product to bring it into today's design standards. So I looked at materials, I looked at the external design of it. But also I found that the photography on these listings was really boring. There was nothing in it that I felt captured the emotion of what this product could capture. So I think it was a combination of, I didn't really innovate on the product enough to say that it was unique, but I innovated enough on it to make sure that it stood out because of quality and much better design. Yeah. And then from a listing perspective, I think my listing outdid the competitors.
And so with it taking off like that, how did you manage it in terms of capital and stuff? Because it was a bit of a shock to the system of how it took off like a rocket ship.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I did have some money to get started with. I am now, though, because it has grown so rapidly, managing the cash flow is tricky because, with each order that I do, it sells so well that then I've got to place an order 3 times the previous amount. It's not like I'm putting just another 1,000 on. I'm putting, I think my initial order of the product was 3,000 and my last order was 12,000. I did an order of 5,000 in June, 6,500 in July, and then in August, 12,500.
And do you think you're going to get through Q4 with that?
If I'm lucky, I think so. I think I've got enough to get me through to January.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I spoke to the supplier today and we're already talking about the next order. Yeah.
Excellent. And so where next for you with this? Obviously you've hit 7 figures now on the business this year, really, isn't it? So so I got this time right. I know you had the year where you had the problems. You really got started in January this year. Yeah. It really only the business took off in July and you're already at 7 figures and we're now in late November.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
I saw the power of leverage, Danny, in terms of, and it's one of the things I learned very early on in my entrepreneurial career is you have to work out how you can leverage your time and how you can wash, rinse and repeat. So they're the two pillars for me is how do I leverage my time and how can I wash, rinse, repeat what I've already done. So once I had that winner, that first product, I thought, okay, so to leverage my time, let's not develop another product yet. Let's just take that to other markets. So in March, I decided it went so well in the first, couple of months that let's take that to other markets. So then I registered for UK and Australia. And so that was the whole wash, rinse, repeat. Take something that's working and repeat it elsewhere. I can keep doing that. I mean, I haven't even launched in Germany yet. So there's still so much further this one product can go.
Yeah. So where is next? What's the plans?
Well, I've had 4 products go live in Q4, new products. That brings the total up to 5 products. And the 4 new products have also taken off. One in particular is outselling that first product. It's just an absolute winner. So next year, the plan probably will be, depending on what happens with logistics, to go into EU. And I probably will, I do have one other product launch that I'm already have on the cards.
Yeah.
So I think next year will be about stabilizing, maybe growing into EU and launching this one product.
And what about an exit? Got plans? Got eye on the prize there?
Yes, I certainly do. Speaking with my accountant today about that, and looking at maybe in the next 2 years to do that. So I keep going, get this last product launch done in the first 6 months of next year, and then maybe go into EU, and then we stabilize, and then we prepare for exit.
Okay. And then after exit, where do you want to go?
Another brand.
You want to go again? You want to rinse and repeat? Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to do it several times. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. How would you like to be remembered?
I think a big part of my business is about social corporate responsibility, and I do give back to charities. For each product that I sell, I give back to different girls' charities around the world. And I had something really amazing happen today. A woman who had purchased one of my products, she purchased it on another marketplace where I am actually allowed to contact the customer. And so I sent her an email to thank her and to let her know that because of her purchase that I had provided a month's worth of sanitary items to a girl in India. And she wrote back and she said, "Thank you so much for the humanitarian work." And she said, "Just to let you know, I purchased this product for a little girl that whose mother went on a Facebook group saying that she's economically struggling and could she get some help with some presents for her kids." And I literally got goosebumps, Danny, and I thought, that's why I do what I do. Like, it's this whole idea of giving and giving to others. So even though I'm creating this monster of a business that is generating capital, it's also giving back and creating a difference. So I guess if I was to be remembered for something, it's about making difference to others' lives. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to say legacy or money, but it sounds like legacy for you.
Definitely.
Yeah. What is biggest regret?
Look, I don't tend to regret things too much because, even when opportunities are missed or things don't go as you plan, there's so much to learn from them. If I could replay things again, I would so love to have found this opportunity many years ago. I don't say that's a regret, but yeah, of course, I would have loved to have been on this journey a long time ago.
Cool. Well, that was your in-depth. How'd you feel?
Thanks, Danny.
You good? Happy?
Yeah.
What time is it there? We've got you out of bed till 3:30 in the morning?
Yeah, it's 3:38.
Yeah. And you've got a big backup for the US market, haven't you? Get a couple of hours sleep in, get the kids out.
Yeah, well, that's why I didn't want to have the coffee, because I thought if I have coffee, I'm going to try and go back to sleep. My kids will be up at 7.
Yeah, indeed. Cool. Well, look, we'll wrap it there. Just to remind you guys, Fee will be one of our breakthrough for Branded by Women coming in February next year. So you'll be able to see her presentation as well alongside everyone else. We'll have the same host again. I'll do some announcements very, very soon. Fee, if people want to reach you, what's the best way to get in contact?
I do have a Facebook page under Fiona Soutter. So if you contact me via that page, that's probably the best place.
Excellent. Guys, I'll be back here 4 p.m. tomorrow. Again, thank you, Fee, for coming in. Take care of yourselves, take care of your family, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.